Welcome to 15 Minutes of Pharma. So I am Pereira, Cruz, and I am here with my friend Manuel Fernandes, as always. So today we continue our If I Were the CEO series. So imagine a family-owned pharmaceutical company that has grown steadily for years. So it has good products and loyal customers, supported by a site with solid technical knowledge. Now, the founder still knows most of the key people, so when a customer asks for something difficult, the issue reaches the founder. When production and quality disagree, well, the same thing happens. CAPEX and planning decisions, along with staffing questions, keep finding their way back to that particular desk. So, Manuel, when does the company need a professional site director?
Well, Carlos, that's a great question to open today's episode, and and I would say, Carlos, that the need becomes clear when the industrial system depends, as we have just described in the introduction, on one person to connect everything. When the complexity of the industrial system has grown beyond what can be coordinated informally. That model may have served the company well for many years. The founder knew the customers and the plant well, which obviously allowed quick decisions, which are a big plus. Growth brings more products and more regulatory pressure, and the investment agenda also becomes harder to manage. And so, Carlos, the links between decisions can no longer sit in one person's head. So, in my view, at this stage, the company needs a site director who can run the industrial system with a clear mandate.
Okay, so but Manuel, now how is it for an owner or a CEO or a founder to agree with that big change in his or her personal life and in the life of the company? Hmm?
You have just, touched I would say, the the cornerstone of all these processes. Carlos,
Hmm.
I would say that this aspect is essential. It's key in a restructuring. For the founder, it obviously represents a new phase in their life. Um, they most probably they must have already done an analysis, a deep introspection that should bring them, clarity about the legacy they want to leave for the future. And I would say that as a result of this introspection, the founder will have to accept that the company needs to transform, to modernize, in order to meet the new demands of the market. So he must have reached during this process the conclusion that a new organizational model is fundamental. And obviously, this is not about judging the past, but rather about securing the company's future. Um, because moving up requires obviously new capabilities and new demands.
Okay, so the founder, okay, accepted or really realized that okay needs this kind of new person in the company. So
Yeah.
companies often describe that person as a strong operations leader. So when does that description, or what does that description leaves out?
Well, quite a lot, Carlos, in my view. A pharmaceutical site brings together science, good manufacturing practices, engineering, uh, planning, economics, and obviously people. And the site director works where all those areas meet. For instance, a commercial promise changes the production plan, a portfolio decision changes batch sizes and has obviously impact in working capital. A capex choice affects your qualification program and may even disrupt routine production. The way deviations are handled shapes compliance as well as delivery. And so, Carlos, someone has to connect those consequences while the decisions are still being made.
So you are describing, okay, someone who leads beyond production. You mentioned engineering, science, economics, financials. So someone beyond just production, right?
Right, Carlos. Of course, that production is central, although many problems that appeared there began most of the time somewhere else. Take, for instance, an unstable production schedule. The immediate symptom sits on the shop floor, while the root cause, may be a demand that the plant, a demand plan that changes every week, or a portfolio full of small campaigns. Uh, for instance, a recurring deviation may point towards operator performance, but once you look more closely, the equipment, maintenance history, process design, or supervision may be driving it. So, Carlos, the site director has to follow the whole thread across functions and understand where the system is creating the problem.
So, and what makes that hard in practice?
Well, each function is protecting something important. For instance, quality protects the patient and the license that the company that the site has to operate. Operations, for instance, has to keep all the work moving. The engineering guys always need time and enough time to maintain and improve equipment and the assets. The commercial department is obviously always close to the customer. Finance keep always a close eye into the economics, and obviously people need clarity and fair decisions. So, Carlos, I would say that the site director has to aid those needs inside a real situation, and there is rarely a clean answer. For instance, a customer may need an earlier delivery, and the site might find a way to help, although the change could disrupt another campaign and increase quality risk. So someone has to understand the full effect before making the commitment. And, I would argue that this kind of choice builds industrial judgment.
Okay, so does the site director need to be the deepest technical expert in the building? Let's say so.
No,
Yeah.
the short answer is no, and I would even add that it would be undesirable. The technical experts should remain the experts. A strong site director, Carlos, gives them space to do their work, and has to know enough to have serious conversations with them, and that means understanding the process, the GMP context, together with the economics behind the decision. And it also means asking questions that reach the real issue. Because, sometimes a constraint is physical. The equipment cannot do what is being asked, for instance. However, at other times, the constraint comes from habit, from weak data, from unclear ownership, or from a risk that nobody has examined properly. Uh, and the site director needs enough technical and industrial literacy to tell the difference.
Okay, so and where does credibility come from? So people on a pharma site can be skeptical of a leader who arrives with a polished message. Yeah.
Yeah, that's for sure, Carlos. I would say that that people they will watch the decisions that the leaders take. They will notice whether the leader understands what happens during a difficult shift, for instance. Uh, they see whether quality is heard before a commitment is made. They also see whether a recurring problem is allowed to return because fixing it would disturb the schedule. Carlos, credibility grows when the leader deals fairly with pressure and explains the choice in language that people recognize from their own work. And well, it also grows when the site director goes to the shop floor, listens carefully, and stays, long enough to understand what is really happening.
Okay. So with the CM and with the CDMO, okay, let's say the scenario is it's set adds another layer because the site is receiving opportunities from outside the company, right?
Yeah, right. Absolutely, Carlos. And that can make the role especially demanding. Business development may bring in an attractive project. Well, the revenue looks good, and obviously the customer wants speed. Um, but the site then has to understand the fit. Can the current equipment support the process? How much analytical and validation work will be needed? What happens to existing customers during the transfer? How much complexity will the new campaign have once the commercial excitement, so to speak, has passed? And well, a site director who understands the business can help shape the deal before the site becomes trapped by it.
Yeah. So that I think that connects with the idea of good growth that we discussed in earlier episodes. Yeah, that good growth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, Carlos. Absolutely,
Hmm.
it does. Because, well, growth changes the operating system. Obviously, a project may bring revenue while weakening flow and service, with margins obviously suffering later. And the site director should enter that conversation early enough to influence the choice. Because once the contract is signed, the room for judgment becomes very small.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Manuel, if you were the CEO, okay, how would you describe the role to a candidate? Mhm.
Yeah, that's a very good question, Carlos. I think that I would be as crisp and synthetic and to the point as possible. I would say something like this. Look, you are here to make the industrial system work as one business. So you need to understand how decisions travel through the site. You have to help experts solve the right problems and give the executive team an honest view of what the operation can carry. And I think that this,
Mhm.
encapsulates the real core of the site director responsibility.
Okay. So, Manuel, I think we can do here a pause and in part two, we can move to the role of that particular person. Okay.
Sure,
So,
Carlos.
what experience builds the judgment needed to lead a pharma site, and how should a CEO assess candidates from different operating environments? So, Manuel, thank you, and thank you all for listening to 15 minutes of pharma. Hmm?
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you, Carlos. And
uh,
thank you all for listening.